Diki, Gaur Premanandi. Notice I'm holding the microphone right by my face, and let's see if it works. Where's Kriti? You here? Not here. So here's our test to see if... At the end of this presentation, I'm going to ask, I hope I'll remember to ask, is anyone having difficulty hearing, like I have difficulty hearing, with the acoustics of the amplification system? So let's see if it works. And one other little thing, I found out when I got back why those audio clips weren't playing. Remember, those of you that were here? It's because the PowerPoint was set up to link with YouTube, but my Wi-Fi wasn't connected to the system's YouTube, and so it didn't work. As soon as I got back, it worked because it's connected to Wi-Fi. So I've corrected the problem, or Bhakti Dari corrected the problem. We just extracted the audio, and it's going to be embedded in the presentation for the next group of people. But that's a little detail. My meditation in preparing for this Festival of the Holy Name, in part, was looking to our exalted acharyas. There is certainly the availability of sadhu sangha through Vani. Yes? Bapu and Vani. And I'm tempted to tell a few stories, but I just want to make sure I cover the subject here, so I'm going to refrain from telling stories. But Vani is the best way. And one can associate with exalted personalities through their nice instructions. And so these are some nice instructions from Bhakti Siddhanta Sarasvati Thakur about the Holy Name and immersion in the Holy Name. And if we hear with a heart that's ready to receive his sound vibration, we'll get closer to where we want to go. And I thought a nice way to begin was to honor Bhakti Siddhanta Sarasvati Thakur by indicating a particular event in his life, amongst many events in his life, but very outstanding event in his life was his commitment to not compete with or imitate, but perform the chanting of the Holy Name on the same platform as Haridas Thakur. Namacharya, Haridas Thakur ki jai. And Bhakti Siddhanta, not to imitate, but had that same capacity before he began his mission. So the circumstance was Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur was in Jagannath Puri with his father, Bhakti Vinod Thakur, and very near to the Bhajan Kutir of Bhakti Vinod Thakur was the place where the Samadhi of Haridas Thakur was situated. Samadhi of Haridas Thakur near the beach, arranged directly by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So there's a Samadhi of Haridas Thakur, and next to the Samadhi of Haridas Thakur was this very celebrated personality. You see, this is not necessarily a photograph of him, but it's a Babaji, Radha Ramana Charana Das Babaji, celebrated person during his time. However, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur took exception to two things. One, he invented a mantra that had rasa basa, mixed mellow. And I'm not going to repeat his mantra, but Bhakti Siddhanta confronted him publicly or personally. This is rasabhasa. This is not to be done. He was fearless, not foolish. He was fearless. And the other was, you have a practice that's not given to us by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and that practice was called Saki Beki. So one of his prominent disciples, he had him dress as a gopi, a Saki, and practice entering into the bhava of a gopi, Saki Beki. And Bhakti Siddhanta challenged him. This is, whatever he said, nonsense or rubbish or not to be done. It became a big scene. So much of a big scene that Bhaktivinoda Thakur, it was like a civil war, or it could have become violent. Bhaktivinoda Thakur suggested to his son, why don't you go to Mayapur and chant Hare Krishna? So he went to Mayapur for 9 years, starting from the age of 31, and he took a vow, Nama Vrata. We also take a vow at the time of initiation. He took a big vow. His vow was he would chant 3 billion names, and he calculated it would take around 9 years. And his commitment was 3 times 64 rounds a day. So we're going to be having on Sunday, tomorrow, a 64 round day, piece of cake, right? Piece of cake. I mean, for some people, it's not going to be manageable for different reasons. But the reason for presenting this is for us to appreciate the words of the Vani of Bhakti Siddhanta about the holy name is from realization, profound realization. And he was guiding people that didn't have the same capacity as he had, and so he toned it down. He didn't expect the same thing from them that he expected of himself, but he gave teachings about the power of the holy name and the impact, the one who chants the holy name that is so powerful, where it can take you. And it's not exaggeration. So for the first 4 years, he went to the Yogpith at near the place of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance, and he lived in a grass hut. And in the grass hut, he chanted 3 times 64 rounds every day. And after the first 4 years, he shifted and built a little cottage. I'm going to show, this is a photograph, a 2 days ago photograph of the place where he sat at the Chaitanya Gaudiya Math in a little cottage on the former site of the house of Chandrasekhar Acharya. Chandrasekhar Acharya was Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's uncle, maternal uncle. And he built a little cottage, and for the next 5 years, that's where he stayed. And all day long, just to give you some idea, that's 192 rounds, a lot of mantras. And if it took him 16 hours, and I just took that number because sleep, bathing, eating, and miscellaneous. Because my understanding is during this period of time, he also wrote. But if it was 16 hours a day, it's 5 minutes per round times 192 for 9 years. Now, it's otherworldly, right? Otherworldly. Shyamasundar is leading a group. He shared with me that he's slowed down a little bit. And what's your current pace? How many minutes per round? 9 minutes per round. So if it's 7 minutes per round, it's for 16. It's around 2 hours. I don't know what you all do, But here's what Bhakti Siddhanta did for 9 years, every day. Otherworldly. That's the emphasis. So when we hear his instructions about chanting, it's from a place of realization. It's not just notional. During those 9 years, one of the things that he did was he observed Chaturmasya in a very strict way. So sometimes we see him with a beard. That's because he didn't shave. One of the things he did was he didn't shave. And another thing that he did was during Chaturmasya, he ate once a day for 4 months, once a day. And the procedure was, it was unspiced, unsalted khichdi put on a leaf plate, and he would lean over and eat with his mouth, not with his hands. And when you lean over, your stomach is reduced. Then you sit back up and it's normal again for 4 months of Chaturmasya. I mean, I don't recommend anyone try it. Maybe someone has tried it. I don't know. But it's, his capacity for austerity and his capacity for absorption of the holy name is astounding. And in Ekadasis, every Ekadasi, Nirjala Ekadasi, I mean, austerities can make one strong, especially during auspicious times. They can especially be beneficial, but his capacity was otherworldly. Here's another photograph taken 2 days ago of that little cottage place at Chaitanya Gaudiya Math. And at Chaitanya Gaudiya Math, these are the deities, Gandharvaka, Giridhari, and Gaurahari. And there's a wonderful story behind how the deities of Gandharvaka, Giridhari were acquired. Bhakti Siddhanta personally went to select the deities in Jaipur. He saw these deities he wanted, and the murti maker they couldn't work out something, for whatever the reason, I can't recall. And that night, the murti maker had a dream in which the deity appeared and said, I want to be worshipped by him. Make sure that he's given, just give him to me. Give me to him. And so it happened. Transcendentalist. So we're going to hear some instructions from Bhakti Siddhanta about chanting. But that was just to set our hearts and our minds to hear his teachings. Now this particular set of slides was provided to me by a godbrother. I won't mention his name, but he shared it with me because he has made it a daily practice before he begins his japa. I don't know if he's still doing this, but for at least a couple of years, every morning before he began his japa, he would meditate. He would see these images and meditate on Bhakti Siddhanta's instructions in chanting. And it helped him so much, or it affected him so much, that he shared it with me, and so I'm sharing with you. It's a letter. This Patravali is a collection of letters that he wrote to disciples. And here's one of those letters. I'm overjoyed to hear that your enthusiasm for chanting is increasing. As our contaminations are removed by chanting, the Lord's form, qualities, and pastimes will be revealed to us in the holy name. Note the preposition is in. Not over there is the form, qualities, and pastimes. Rather, it's within the holy name are the name, qualities, form, and pastimes within the name. A little bit from yesterday, those of you who weren't with us. Science has demonstrated that spiritual sound has form. through the tonoscope system or cymatics. Sound has form, a spiritual sound has spiritual form. But it can be represented in a two-dimensional, but then Krishna is not just two-dimensional. So as one's contaminations are removed by proper chanting, you have different adjectives besides chanting, something becomes revealed. He's encouraging his enthusiastic disciple in this letter. There is no point in making a separate effort to artificially remember the Lord's form, qualities, and pastimes. Lila Smarana, for example, is a practice that some Vaishnavas do by remembrance. And there's not harm, but he's not saying don't do it, but he's saying it's not necessary. But, it may help one get to the point of absorption in the name. He doesn't speak about that. It's not, the holy name stands alone. That's how he is a glorification and his direct experience. The Lord and his name are one and the same. This will be understood clearly when the coverings in your heart are removed. Now, I plan tomorrow morning to go into this particular point a little bit more. Some teachings of Bhakti Siddhanta, where he says, and you'll hear it again tomorrow morning, just before the 64 round day, that it's not possible with our present mind to realize or understand. Notionally we can accept, but to realize that the name and the person are non-different is not possible. It's not possible. We can accept it and have faith in it, but to realize it and experience it, it's not possible with our little binary processor. So how has it become possible? It becomes possible, we'll hear tomorrow morning, by hearing with the spiritual ear. And I'll show you the image again tomorrow morning. I'm connecting dots to make a nice picture. The dot from yesterday was, there are 4 levels of consciousness that are connected also with 4 levels of sound, and it starts with the body. So with the ear you can hear, and then you process it within the mind, and then you get an idea of the sound through the mind. Then comes the intelligence. There's Sanskrit terms for each of these. We'll see the image tomorrow. And you start to get a sense of where the object fits into the bigger picture of things. And then finally is the form and the sound are the same. That's for spiritual sound, and it's not true for material sound. So that stage of realization is what he's describing. Again, in the name, all these things are there. And this will be understood clearly when the coverings in your heart are removed. So that's our first project, Chaitadarpana Marjanam. And Shyamsundar Prabhu is going to be speaking about the first verse of Shikshastaka, including Chaitadarpana Marjanam and all the rest of it. And then he's going to be explaining today why we don't experience these things. I'm giving a hint from Bhakti Siddhanta. Why? By chanting without offenses, small thing, right? You will personally realize that all perfections, plural, come from the holy name. Now, he has this realization, and he's sharing his realization with his disciple. Through chanting, the distinction that exists between the self and the gross and subtle bodies is gradually effaced, and one realizes one's own spiritual form. Effaced, he is really great with language. Effaced is not a word that least I'm accustomed to using or hearing. What does effaced mean? Easy. Just like when there's coins that are old and they rub and rub and rub and rub and rub, and what's imprinted on the coin becomes effaced just by rubbing and rubbing and rubbing and rubbing, and you can't distinguish clearly the date that's on the coin and the person that's on the coin and whatever else, the words "in God we trust" or something on the coin. It becomes effaced. It's no longer distinguishable. That's what effaced means. So the distinction between the self and the gross and subtle bodies is gradually effaced through chanting. Of course, with some adjectives about chanting. Offenseless chanting. One realizes one's own spiritual form. That's the first stage, second stage, the cleansing and the awakening, not only of one's identity as a soul, but one's spiritual form, Swarup Siddhi. He has experience of this and he's sharing it with his disciples, or now with us. Once aware of the spiritual body, not just Aham Brahmasmi, but spiritual body or spiritual form, as one continues to chant, one sees the transcendental nature of the Lord's form. And it's not like I'm over here and over there is the Lord in his form, then I can see his form. It's within the name. There's no distinction. So this is when one hears with spiritual ear, or with an ear that's no longer covered with the filters of false ego, our dear friend, identifying with the body or the mind. Only the holy name reveals the spiritual form of the living being and then causes him to be attracted to Krishna's form. So it doesn't mean we don't do other things. We certainly do other things, and he'll say it in the course of this letter. We do other things. Worship deities, hear from the scriptures, serve the Vaishnavas. We do many other things. Take Krishna Prasadam, join Kirtan. But the foundation is the holy name. So he's going to go through a series, starting with the form of Krishna. Only the holy name reveals the spiritual qualities of the living being and then causes him to be attracted to Krishna's qualities. So he went through the form, Nama, Rupa, Guna, Lila. You've heard this sequence before. It's in Harinam Chintamani. In sequence, Nama, Rupa, now comes Guna, qualities. The spiritual qualities of living being, and then causes him, the chanter, offenseless chanter, to be attracted to Krishna's qualities. Again, only the holy name reveals the spiritual activities of the living being, and then causes him to be attracted to Krishna's pastimes. Nama, Rupa, Guna, Lila. By service to the holy name, we do not mean only the chanting of the holy name, semicolon. It also includes the other duties of the chanter. If we serve the holy name with the body, mind, and soul, then the direction of that service spontaneously manifests. The direction of that service spontaneously manifests, like the sun in the clear sky of the chanter's heart. We're not there yet, but that's what he's encouraging us and encouraging his disciple to come to that stage. The whole purpose, the whole purpose of this gathering together is to get closer to that, understand what the goal is, and get closer to it. What is the nature of the holy name? Eventually all these understandings spontaneously appear in the heart of one who chants the holy name. Last, the true nature of Harinam is revealed by listening to, reading, and studying the scriptures. So before you have that realization, the nature is revealed, and then the experience is through the holy name. It is unnecessary to write anything further on this subject. All these things will be revealed to you through chanting. And this is very high. And he's not expecting that you get in the elevator and press the button and you're just on the high top platform. That's not exactly how it works. But the process is meant to take us there, provided the right kind of chanting occurs. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Sarasvati Thakur ki jai. And Srila Prabhupada is honoring, this is a photograph of Prabhupada honoring Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur on his appearance day in a very humble setting, but the principle is complete. What I'd like to do next is a little interactive segment. So listen carefully, and then when I finish, then you can do the needful. The interactive segment is something that we've done at other festivals of the Holy Name, and that is sit with one person and take turns for about 5-8 minutes. One person is chanting, and the other person is listening to the person chanting. And when the 5-7 minutes is over, I'll ask you to stop, and then the person who's listening can critique what they heard. And then we'll flip. The other person that was hearing does the chanting, and the other person that was chanting can do the hearing and listen and then critique. So you have to sit with somebody that you feel comfortable with, that you're going to get your chapa critiqued. I predict it'll help you in your chanting for the 64-round day. And whatever else you may chant for the rest of the day and on into the future. Is it clear what I'm speaking? 2 people, not 3, not 4, just 2 in pairs. And find a pair, find someone you can confidently sit with and chant. And don't chant too loud because there's other people in the room, but enough so the other person can hear you distinctly. So I'm looking at my watch. It's now 8 minutes after 8 in the morning. We'll stop at 8:15. Yes. One person's chanting, the other is listening till I say stop, and it's going to be at 8:15. Hare Krishna. Let's pause, and the person who was listening can take 2-3 minutes and critique what you heard. Go ahead. Okay, now for part two. Those who had the advantage of hearing another person chanting can now be critiqued in your chanting. Flip roles and, 5 minutes or so. And I'll tell you when to stop. 20 after we'll stop. 25 after. Okay. Now you know what to do next. Those who are hearing your partner chanting japa, you can evaluate or critique what you heard. Hare Krishna. Okay. You can continue during breakfast prasadam to share your experience with one another and with others as well. I think I'm going to do request one from the men's side, one from the ladies' side, to just share highlights of this little experience and experiment we just went through. Okay. And let's try this. Speak right into the microphone so that Subal can lower the volume because you're speaking right into the microphone and we can hear one another better. Go ahead.
Hare Krishna.
Whoa. He's going to adjust the volume. Go ahead.
A feedback that I was given was that I was a part of the mantra was that or wasn't being heard. The feedback that both Roland and I gave each other was our enunciation be better. Specifically, the word Krishna. For some reason, when I speak Krishna, it sounds clear to me, but it just comes out like Shna for the person that's hearing it.
Mm.
In general, we kind of both were feeling like, for some reason, when I'm hearing myself, it sounds clear, but it doesn't sound clear when somebody's hearing me as much. So just enunciating overall more clearly.
I have a comment on your reflection here. During our 64 round day, or when you're trying to increase the quantity and quality of your chanting, it's a trick, but you can test yourself if you're starting to get distracted or a wandering mind, try to pronounce the words or enunciate the words clearly. And it's a trick because then you have to hear. And when you hear, then the mind stops wandering because you heard. And even if it's, less than ideal, you're trying to hear, am I pronouncing properly? So you captured the mind. It's a nice trick. Try it if you get wandering mind tomorrow. On the ladies' side, someone would like to volunteer what your experience was during this little experiment. I don't see any hands. Okay. I've learned how to call on people if there's no hands. Speak right into the microphone so he can adjust the volume.
Hare Krishna. So, the first thing that seemed to be the similar experience of Hare Hare and Krishna, we couldn't really hear. And something that also I felt when I was hearing, was it takes a lot of patience to hear. And it was just an inspiration that if I don't chant with at least some attention, it's very hard for Radha Shyamasundar. It's just obliging them to hear than really serving them or having them to hear. That was something that came. And specifically, we have heard that the first Hare is something we can hear. In the effort of hearing the first Hare, Satya pointed out to me that the last two Hares were missing out, or they were sleepy or tired. Hare Hare, last Hare Hare was start. That was helpful.
Okay. I'll share something from my having done this at least once before that I remember. When you're listening to someone else's japa, you can tell when they start to get fuzzy. And then they may fade back into being clear, but you can hear when their mind is not focused, you can hear it. And when the mind is focused or their articulation is clear, you can hear it. It's in the sound. The state of the mind is in the sound, conveyed through sound. So it's kind of on schedule. What I want to do next is a few more Vani or instructions of Bhakti Siddhanta about chanting, and then we'll have just some general discussion. And we'll end on time. At least that's my plan. End at 9 o'clock. Keep the schedule. Here's one I like very much. And it certainly has to be balanced with the fact that we're going to, tomorrow, will be many of us chanting at the same time. And so we need to be respectful of the other persons near us or in the room. Can't have somebody chanting too loudly. But when you're not in this situation, chant the Maha Mantra loudly. That's relative. And with attachment to things. This will drive away inertia, worldly ills, and disturbances. When you're chanting alone and you're not going to be disturbing others around you, my understanding from my discussion with Shyamasundar, he has a rule in his japa class or japa session. You have to be respectful of the other people online. So moderate, please. And when you have the opportunity, it helps to capture the mind. A little diversion is there's some discussion, there has been some discussion in relation to discussions with Haridas Thakur, whether the chanting should be done aloud or silently. This is the Hare Krishna mantra chanting, in contrast to the Gayatri mantra chanting, but specifically. So Haridas Thakur explains, not necessarily like amplified loudly, but loudly as opposed to silently, because that sound vibration is beneficial to others who hear that sound, other souls of different species and whatever that may hear that sound. It's beneficial, and therefore aloud is better. Aside from it, also helps to capture the mind. Now there's a book called Amrita Vani, which I've selected 3 little segments from. So they're numbered. This is number 87. There's a few parts. The holy name is by nature eternal and full of knowledge and bliss. By the holy name's mercy, the living entity revives his spiritual consciousness. Sri Krishna, who is the reservoir of all transcendental pleasure, manifests in a heart filled with simplicity. Before eyes that have been fully spiritualized, on a tongue inclined to his service, and in an ear inclined to hear Krishna Katha. Again, the holy name manifests in those senses that are engaged only in pleasing his senses. Now, when I meditate on his words, it's not just notional or in keeping with the Sampradaya's teachings or scriptural teachings, etc. He has realizations of these. And when one hears from one who has such realizations, it has a special potency beyond just the text, kind of textbook answer or response. But it's this very special time hearing Amrita Vani from Bhakti Siddhanta. Here's another one. Just because mundane thoughts appear in the mind while we chant the holy name does not mean we should slacken our chanting. The useless thoughts will gradually disappear as the irrevocable fruit of chanting the holy names. Do not be in a hurry. Nice. We Hare Krishna, we don't hurry Krishna. And we should be also not hurrying ourselves or trying to hurry Krishna to hurry up and give us what we want. The process will work, and other distracting thoughts, we neglect them and resume or return attentiveness to our main business, shelter in Krishna. One more. Amritavani number 94. The distance between ourself and our gross and subtle bodies gradually diminishes when we chant the holy name, and we soon revive awareness of our original constitutional position. It's similar to that other quote that I showed you in the previous session. It's just the words are different, but the notion is, in conditioned state, there's a big gap between what we know and who we really are. But that gap or that distance between is gradually diminished when we chant the holy name. Of course, there's the qualitative adjective that is appropriate here. And we'll be discussing from Bhaktivinoda Thakur particularly the also this evening or this late afternoon, Sanatan Goswami and Namabas. When we are thus self-realized, the Lord's pure holy name will manifest in our heart, and we will directly see Sri Krishna's transcendental form. And I hope you're enthusiastic for that event. But of course, there's a distance between us and that event. But that's the intention, or the bestowal of fruits that come to one who engages in chanting. Just stepping back from what was just done, particularly hearing from Bhakti Siddhanta Sarasvati Thakur, is looking up to him as a person who is otherworldly. I mean, even after he had attained all of this, 9 years of 192 rounds a day, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, he took sannyas. He was already beyond the varnashram system, but he accepted sannyas in a very unique way for a purpose. And that the purpose was service to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by being a sannyasi rather than being a Babaji, because he had already demonstrated he was the best of Babajis, beyond the varnashram system. He accepted that which is within the varnashram system for the purpose of serving Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his mission. As Mahaprabhu did, he did. And his teachings are worth our careful audition. And the Vani from such a person can help us get to that standard. It's sadhu sangha through his Vani. So let's see if there's some discussion on whatever you'd like to discuss.
Sri Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's statements are really powerful. Thank you for sharing. Maharaj, we were recently hearing Hari Parshad's Prabhu's class when he was here. He did a whole class on seeing Krishna. What does that mean? And, related to this particular statement. And conclusion is that when one is at that transcendental platform, they have antar-darshan of Krishna, meaning the internal vision, the mind's eye, so to speak, seeing Krishna. And my thoughts kept going back to this one thing I heard from you before, is where someone asked you, have you seen God, as they would do to Prabhupada? Your response was, no, but I feel His presence every day. And that's good enough for me. My question is, do acharyas speak about, as one is progressing on the path of spiritual life, do acharyas speak about what that feeling of Krishna's presence looks like and grows to the point of being able to see Krishna directly in transcendental form?
I'm reflecting, in my course of reading our great Acharya's writings, is there something that directly speaks to your question? And nothing specific comes to mind of like what the experience is as one is progressing. The transition that Bhakti Siddhanta Sarasvati Thakur wrote in this letter to one disciple is very similar to what I do recall reading. So it's Namarupa Guna Lila, that is to say, within the heart of a perfected soul, the pastimes of Krishna are enacted, and one can see and experience that. But it's beyond. It starts with It starts with the chanting and the cleansing, and then experiencing one's own spiritual identity and form, and then progressively the Lord's form. So it's a sequence, but the steps of that sequence, I don't recall reading anything. Most likely there's some discussion. But nothing comes to mind specifically, the in-between stages, the phases of going to that experience and what does that feel like, look like, etc. Nothing comes to mind specifically. Anybody else in the room that has an answer to that? Some Acharya's references that address that question? Anyone else? Sundar, I'll call on you. I'm sure you'll have something to share with us about. Nothing. Okay. Varsana, yes?
One of the first few slides you had mentioned holy name is stands alone, all in all, and the subsequent slide, Siddhanta Saraswati does say that other duties like reading scriptures and all of those involve serving the holy name.
Yes.
I was also remembering this earlier, a couple of weeks ago, Hari Prashad Prabhu was visiting, and one of the slides he had was a tripod stand. 3 things: chanting, hearing, and remembrance. Shravanam, Kirtanam, and Smaranam. They all have to go together. We also hear, Prabhupada says, where is the question of mind? You chant and you hear.
Yes.
Could you speak about how does it look like where Smaranam is going along with chanting?
My understanding is very simple. It's an evolution or an organic progression of sequence. So where does smarana take place? It takes place within the mind. And the mind is not pure, is going to have remembrance of something other than transcendence, a whole bunch of other somethings. That's what smarana is in the material realm. So my understanding in response to your question is that its place is a natural organic evolution of the hearing and chanting process. Remembering that which we have forgotten. So that's its place. It's Prabhupada's words. I've come to remind you of that which you have forgotten. So there's the sadhana of Shravanam Kirtanam, and then the remembrance is the byproduct of A and B, removing the covering and awakening what we've forgotten. That's already there. but now covered. And so remembrance comes as a byproduct or fruit or mature, a gradual evolutionary organic stage of Shravanam Kirtanam. So his metaphor of tripod doesn't discount what I just said, or what he said doesn't discount what I said. As one does progress, smarana goes on. It's, like the last verse of chapter 6, Bhagavad Gita. The two parts of the Uttama form of bhakti is what the mind does and what the body does. So mind completely absorbed in me, always engaged in my devotional service. So that's Shravanam Kirtanam, and then what the mind does. They go together. That's the tripod. Okay? You have something further? No?
Krishna Guru Maharaj, in one of the slides, there's this quote of Bhakti Siddhanta of Thakur. Only the holy name reveals the spiritual qualities of the living being and then causes him to be attracted to Krishna's qualities.
Mm.
You don't mind, can you elaborate this? Because in my mind, I was thinking all this time. We are meditating on the qualities of the Lord. And as we're meditating on his qualities, the heart gets purified and then we become aware of our own qualities. But here it says that at least my understanding is you understand, the living entity understands its spiritual qualities and then that causes him to be attracted to Krishna's qualities.
So it's a sequence question. A response could be in a variety of, expressed in a variety of ways. One of those varieties of ways is, as long as one still has a conception of self that's in the material realm or false ego realm, one is not going to be able to have a realization of Krishna in his form or qualities. So the sequence says what it says, but it's, the absence of the material conception of self opens the door for the spiritual conception of Krishna and our spiritual qualities. So let's say fundamentally, we're a servant. And to understand that's our inherent quality, that's our sanatana dharma, it opens the door for understanding Krishna's qualities. He's the master to be served, and then details and details of how wonderful is my master. That's one way of thinking of it, sequentially, specifically. But your statement, the second answer, so another response is it doesn't negate meditating upon, appreciating. Certainly Prabhupada engaged us in both, hearing from Scripture the glories of Krishna, the pastimes of Krishna, and wow, the loving exchanges that Krishna has with his devotees. That's a quality, and it's also a pastime. So appreciating that may certainly help us become more inspired and realized of who we are, in a sequential stage of who we are, besides Nitya Siddhanta Krishna, Nitya Krishna Das, and more details by the glories of Krishna. Here's something, and a third answer is kind of the same, but a third answer is, one of Bhakti Siddhanta's statements is, in speaking about the glories of the holy name, you've heard me say this before, it's, for me it's meaningful. It's not just the name stand alone, but rather we don't worship Krishna without Radha. Similarly, the name is Krishna and Radha is Harikatha. We worship Radha Krishna. So he says the same thing in a different way in one of these slides. It says, the truths of Krishna become revealed through our other activities. So Scripture is there because Scripture gives us, Bhagavatam gives us, let's say specifically, an understanding of how wonderful is our Krishna. And that gives impetus to go beyond our coverings, and it helps us go beyond our coverings. Just the hearing the topics of Krishna, it's also purification, like the holy name. And they go together. A third answer is they're simultaneous, and he's indicated it as a sequential, first this and then that. And another way of expressing it is they're sequential. They're simultaneous. As one grows, the other grows. Not exactly first this and then that. The spiritualizing of consciousness, they're simultaneous, both. I'm looking at the clock, and the clock says we should end. So we'll end. And you have a nice schedule. And if somebody want to make an announcement of where they go for prasadam, in case people don't know where to go for prasadam. Who's our MC? Here he is.
Hare Krishna.
Whoa. Check the
I
volume.
would like to once again welcome folks who died last night and joined us today. Welcome. It is here, everybody. So I just wanted to list out the next few events. So 9 to 10, we are heading to breakfast. That's the floor right below. As soon as you enter, there's stairs on both sides. You can follow that. And then at 10 o'clock, we'll start with initiation, followed by lecture by His Grace Ramchandra Prabhu. So thank you so much, and we'll see you at 10 o'clock in this place. Hare Krishna.
Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Sarasvati Thakur Prabhupada ki.
Mark.